Jorg, that was so pretty. I'm always blown away with Microsoft Flight Simulator's ability to recreate the world so accurately as well. But you mentioned 2 videos for us. What else can we have a look at?
Yeah, the second one is it's near and dear to my heart. So there's a long history of aviation in Germany. It goes way back to the Zeppelins and stuff. And we've explored some of this in Flight Sim already with the Junkers F-13, which was the first metal passenger plane. The Doge, that was the first one that crossed the South Atlantic. Then the Junkers U-52. But when you grow up in Germany like I did, there's one plane that stands above them all. It's a real, pinnacle of German aviation, and it's called the Do-X from Dornier. We have a trailer.
Let's look at the trailer then, the Do-X. Oh my goodness, I can't believe they could fly something like that. I mean, those wallpapers alone are fantastic. The city update and the Dornier, it looks so cool, especially the airport that a lot of us flew into here at Cologne Airport. It looks so cool. You must be so proud of it. When can fans get their hands on it? When's this releasing?
Well, so for the airport was for the people of Cologne. We made the Cologne Airport. Here we go. Enjoy. So just about the Do-X a little bit more. So it was designed by famous aircraft designer Claude Dornier, and it was actually the idea was to compete with the big ocean liners of the time. Think Titanic and the ones that made it. So they built 3 of them, and what was interesting is it was only 3 because it was commercially not successful. But they took a famous flight. You saw it in the trailer. From Germany to South America to New York, and there was like all these awesome pictures of it at the Statue of Liberty and all that stuff. But all those planes were lost, and I really wanted to make this as a local legend. And I'd almost given up. I spent 2 years researching this, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't find anything. And then I was happily finding this individual, Peter Kielhorn, and he is the initiator of the Do-X rebuild project, and he's also the president of the Do-X Foundation. And they are trying to rebuild the Do-X true scale, in real life, in Hildesheim by the 100th anniversary. So in 2029 it's supposed to be done. And they gave us all the plans and everything. Because typically we have museums and we can visit those planes. Here was nothing. And just because of these people, I just want to say a big shout out. That is how we could actually create this plane and preserve it. Because we have this idea of digital preservation in Flight Sim, where planes of the past that are oftentimes lost can be enjoyed by generations of the future. So we did that. So happy with it.
Jorg, that's such a beautiful story, honestly. It's so present, the passion and attention to detail that you and the team have in Flight Simulator. It's such a vibrant game from the last few years, but I'm curious what you think makes it so special.
I mean, there's a Flight Sim community, and they make us special. So there's literally hundreds of thousands or millions of people. Their number one hobby in life is aviation. They know everything about planes, and they push us all the time. They want all kinds of details, and they keep saying we need to add this and this and this and this. That has been pushing us forward a lot, and it's super fun actually. And then there's a creator community, is also interesting because we have an SDK. So there's about 2,000 companies and individuals. They make airplanes, airports, all kinds of cool add-ons. And it's a vibrant marketplace. We have a marketplace in the sim that has over 2,500 add-ons. And that alone, that is keeping us fresh. Every morning when I get up, I go on the computer and say, what did they do? And it's always like, it's like opening chocolate. It's awesome.
That's so lovely to hear. I mean, speaking about the future and what's coming as well, there is a new flight simulator that we can look forward to next year. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Flight Sim 2024. It is by far the biggest undertaking ever in simulation. The team is almost 500 people now. We've been working hard. We're adding realistic aviation activities. So it's not just you, the plane, and the planet. It's what planes actually do in real life. So it's if you're interested in aviation at all, this is the one. And I think we're going to have it here next year at Gamescom. I'm really looking forward to showing it.
Well, I can't wait to see it as well. Jörg, congratulations to you and the team again, and the community as well. Thank you so much for chatting with us here at Gamescom today. And from one fan favorite to another, we're going to catch up with the team behind Age of Empires Anniversary Edition to find out what it takes to make such an iconic PC title work on consoles. Let's go.
Welcome to World's Edge, home to the beloved Age of Empires franchise. We've been on a journey to continue the legacy of creating world-class real-time strategy games that started over 25 years ago.
That legacy is all thanks to you, the fans.
You inspire us to develop new ideas and evolve our games.
In 2021, we partnered with the award-winning studio Relic Entertainment to push the franchise into a new era with our latest title, Age of Empires 4.
It was a global event that heralded a new chapter of storytelling and strategy.
Age of Empires 4 humanizes the compelling stories from that historical time and presents a new perspective through engaging gameplay.
It challenges you to make history your story.
And what better way to do that than with a trebuchet?
Did you hear that whoosh?
In the first year of Age of Empires 4, we added new civilizations, new seasons, and features that fans were very excited about.
But there was always something else that fans wanted.
We kept hearing the same thing over and over.
When are you bringing it to Xbox?
We're so excited that finally all the content in Age of Empires 4 is now available on the Xbox console.
But figuring out how to make it for a console audience was easier said than done.
It was impossible to go to any social media platform where the Age of Empires account was posting, where there was not a comment underneath saying, when is it coming to Xbox?
We knew that it was important, especially from the perspective of being able to bring RTS and Age to as many people as possible.
We'd been talking about it for a long time, but it had always come back down to that key factor of getting RTS from PC and mouse onto a controller. You get the defensive stance like, you can't do this. Like, well, why do you feel that way? Well, I'm gonna have to like move a fake mouse around. Okay, we're not doing that. A controller is a drive mechanism. You're driving a character, you're driving a viewpoint. You are driving something through an environment. How do we make that work? How do we find a solution? We have these ideas, but we can't build the game internally. We're only like, we're not a huge RTS studio, but we would love to go look for partners. And the first team on our list that we want to talk to was Relic about doing Age 4.
Relic has been making RTS games for 25 years, and Age of Empires has always been a reference point.
It's truly a global effort between so many different teams: Climax, Forgotten Empires, Relic, and the World's Edge.
World's Edge brought in Climax Studios in the UK, who had a background in console games.
Climax Studios is a real powerhouse when it comes to user interface elements.
And we felt that they could bring a unique perspective to building out the control scheme.
There was a port once upon a time. In 2001, I played it and I hated it. I hated everything about it. So we have a history, even within our franchise, of how not to do a port.
If we were forced to port it, we probably never would have done it.
Our challenge was, we're bringing in Age 4, which has some extra complexities over Age 2. How are we going to make that work? What we found is we could actually use that framework to bring the game into its own.
This game is basically redesigned from the ground up.
Age of Empires 4 is a different engine. It wasn't just a case of doing what Age 2 did. We had to build it all from the ground up.
You have players sitting in the living room away from the TV. We have to reconsider all the UI menus and all the in-game HUDs to make sure they're as legible, as high contrast as possible.
The whole development team knew that micromanaging individual villagers was going to be difficult on console.
We have introduced a lot of automation systems.
All of us as game designers and game creators are always seeking that next thing. Like, how do we evolve the experience? How do we move it forward, right?
There are two that really stand out. First one is called the Villager Priority System.
The Villager Priority System is something we came up with in Age 2 because we were after that idea of like, okay, how do we stop the console player from having to do this insane amount of micromanagement of their villagers? Based on a pie chart, you can say like, hey, 50% of my people are gonna go work on wood, and 25% are gonna go work on food, and the rest are gonna go work on gold. And they'll just start working on them. Now, if you want to change that, we've added all these cool settings for mid-game, early game, wood rush.
That were designed by our pro players. So these presets are not just something that were slapped together.
Or you can turn it off and do everything manually. It's up to you.
We also have the site menu system
that allows you to quickly issue a command contextually on the ground.
It's context sensitive, so it'll bring up the right structure that you can build at that spot. In Age, you were always relegated to having to select a villager, bring up the build menu, click the item that you want, and then drop that build foundation on the battlefield. Now with the SMS, you don't have to do that anymore. You can literally pan the camera over to a spot, bring up your production radial, drop a build foundation there, and a villager will automatically be selected to start the build process on that particular foundation.
The kind of magic to the radio menu is that it allows you to do many things at the same time. With the console version of Age of Empires 4, we also added a new find menu feature. This is a unique radio menu that allows you to quickly find and locate units or buildings or a collection of buildings in the midst of battle.
Those were the primary things that the minute we had them working, we're like, those are in the Age 4 console.
And we often joke between the designers that some of us even prefer to play on the controller now because it is so good.
This was something bigger than a port. This was something that we had to approach the way that one would approach starting out a project from scratch.
Age of Empires 4 on controller is a new experience. Because of that, we knew we needed to design a new entry point.
When we're making tutorials, one of the things that we always try to do is figure out a way to make them not now do this, now click on this. Like, how do we build it into the experience?
He first needed to get a lay of the land.
The Rise of King tutorial is a completely new story within Age of Empires 4.
For a whole new audience, we wanted to bring them through an experience that was a great storytelling experience.
A collection of large rocks caught Guillaume's eye. Wary of hidden threats, he decided to investigate.
But also introduced mechanics to them in a progressive way in which they could learn from it.
We definitely ran into things where we realized that some of the ways that we were building graphics and units were not as optimized as they need to be for something like a console to run really smoothly. But there were things there that actually ended up improving the PC game as well.
I really hope that when we bring all these new console players into Age of Empires 4 for the very first time, that they get to share that enjoyment and everything that we love about the game with their friends and their families, much like I did with my dad when I was growing up. Well, that community is so special to me. I met my wife playing Age of Empires, and maybe when we have children, they'll play Age of Empires too.
So my favorite thing about Age of Empires is the diverse civilizations that are represented. Even the language is representative of the civilizations for that time period. That dialogue grows or changes as the civilization ages up and the time periods change. I've worked in the RTS genre for over 29 years. I'm very genuine in saying that I actually prefer to play RTS games now with the controller.
You get all of the campaigns, all of our civilizations.
And most importantly, mods. Mods will be supported at launch day.
Age of Empires 4 is available now on Xbox consoles and cloud.
We took great care and attention to bring this game to console players, and we hope you're as excited to play it as we are to share it with you.
There's never been a better time to pick up a controller and start making history.
We'll see you on the battlefield.
Well,
Well, we just saw how it was made. I think maybe now it's time to play it for real on console, finally. But first, I'm going to ask you to head to Twitch chat for your chance to win a month of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. So now, please everyone join me in welcoming Chris Rubio to the Xbox stage. Chris, how are you doing today?
I am doing awesome.
It's been a pretty good 24 hours, right? We had Age of Empires 4 Anniversary Edition Shadow drop yesterday onto Game Pass from Opening Night Live. I know it's been a short amount of time, but what has the reaction been like so far?
It's been just overwhelmingly positive.
I like that answer. That's what I was hoping you'd say.
We met with, I've met with a lot of players that have come to our booth. They're like, wow, thank you for bringing it to console. We've been waiting a long time for this. Yep. People that have played it tell us, wow, that it's amazing how you even got it to work. What was the mad science behind that?
What were you doing?
A lot of magic and a lot of goodness went into it, but it's been a very, very awesome. The shadow drop was
yeah,
was
we
great.
do love a shadow drop, don't we? Right, well, we're going to be digging into all of that, but you are here to showcase everything what the team of World's Edge have been working on, and we're going to be doing a live gameplay segment for you all. So we're going to go through Skirmish, and before I do any of the nerdy questions in my head about how you've done it, I'm going to ask you some nerdy questions about what we're going to be looking at here. So what have you got set up for us?
So today we'll be diving into Skirmish, but I want to walk players through a lot of the changes that we made.
Yeah,
you've heard us. If you watch the documentary, we literally rebuilt the front end and a lot of all of the tactical UI. We built it from the ground up, redesigned it so it would work incredibly well on the console. And so I would love to show that off to players and everything that we've done.
The floor is all yours, my darling.
Sweetness. So let's jump in. So this is for the Xbox, we created a brand new front end. And by the way, I love that I'm all the way back here, like 8 feet. Incredibly readable. So this is awesome. Very easy to navigate through our various menus that we created. Just can RB through everything. And again, still kind of it has a lot of the colors and flares that our PC version did, but again, redesigned so that you can couch play from almost 8 feet away, which is awesome.
Let's just pause for a moment. At no point on the screen does it say Age of Empires, but I know what I'm looking at, and you've got an Xbox and controller in your hand. So there you go.
It's awesome.
Job done.
So, we're going to go into single player today, and we're going to set up a skirmish. But I've already set up a skirmish.
No, this one I made earlier.
This is one I made earlier so that we can jump in, and more importantly, it'll enable me to talk about all the cool stuff that we've done.
Nice.
And hopefully not get destroyed by the AI. So,
well, also I'm going to make sure you aren't distracted and you do talk to me during
Yes, that's right.
Because I've heard that you go into focus mode somewhat.
I go into combat mode. So
which I love, because I'm not a combat girly. I like to build my civilizations. I like to make them look very beautiful, and then at the end I'm like, I suppose I need to go bash someone up now.
I do that too. I'm actually quite the builder, and then I get a lot of better players than me that come over and stomp my base. I'm like, I probably shouldn't have been focused on making a cool base.
It's all about turtling the wonder in the base for me. That's how I go for it.
So it's awesome. So we're going to be playing today. We got the English versus the French.
Yep.
Very tried and true classic matchup.
Indeed.
We're going to start with our base kind of already pre-made, and if players out there haven't checked it out, we've released Empire Wars. Which is a kind of a really cool fast start in the game. And Age of Empires 4 is a little bit different than Age of Empires 2. The civs are slightly more asymmetric. So Empires Wars was designed, each civilization starts and was handcrafted to start at the right start that you would expect them to be at that point in time. So a lot of passion and love went into making that mode super awesome. So what we see here is basically the base that I've set up. I got a bunch of workers right here in idle, but more importantly, it's like, well, what's all that UI on the screen?
That is the first thing, especially so you go from PC gameplay, and if you've never played on console, Age 2 came out early this year. If you've not had a chance to play that yourself, it even looks different to that one as well as soon as you load in somewhat.
Yes. So we've went in, we've made a lot of modifications, and our goal is to literally streamline the interface, but at the same time make it incredibly accessible and easy to read for couch play.
Yes,
so
definitely.
One of the first things any PC player would notice is like, oh my gosh, the resource bar is in the top center of the screen. It's on the PC, it's in the lower left. And we found on the console
Thank you for the ad.
we found on the console that that placement is really nice, makes it super easy to read, and we got a lot of learnings actually came from Age of Empires 2. Kudos to that team for an awesome job that they did. So we were able to tap into a lot of that and literally kind of define out. So as I go through the screen in a clockwise motion, we have our resource bar at the top. We have kind of our tribute menu that you can access, with various commands. You'll also see a bunch of little helper widgets, and those were purposely done so there's, it's not mouse and keyboard. It is, you need to, as a new player, it's very helpful to understand which inputs you got to press to access various bits of functionality. The lower right-hand corner, that's kind of your tried and true mini-map.
Indeed, yeah.
You can expand your mini-map, which is a really cool bit of functionality. You can hold down the Y button. You can actually super fast scroll.
It's seamless.
Yep. You can drop camera markers, which I'm going to do here. One more, and then that's a terrible spot for a marker, but I'll drop one right there for the purpose of demo. And then what you can do too on the mini-map is you can just literally just jump around based on those waypoints that you set. So entirely up to the player, however they want to play. And the toolbar, or I should say the D-pad controls that you see in the center of this bottom center there, those are what we call a quick find menu, and it allows players, kind of like hotkey shortcuts on the PC.
Sure.
It allows you to jump to various units, structures that you have on the battlefield. For example, if I press D-pad up, I can cycle through all my idle villagers very quickly.
There they are.
If I want to go to my military, I can press D-pad left, boom, I'm right there with a group of units, and I can kind of cycle through them. Now, if I want, I can actually select all my idle villagers just by holding D-pad up.
Right, you've thought this through, haven't you?
It makes it super simple.
In fact, if we can for a moment, I just want to pause the game. We're going to cut away from the gameplay very quickly. Chat's probably going to know why. And I want to ask you a little bit about what work you've done in the background to try and get it to like the testing phase. And we even heard in that Vidoc just then that I think it's yourself or maybe a lot of other people are really, really excited about playing on controller now.
Yeah, so we have, we've spent, I should say, both teams, Age of Empires 2 and 4, we spent many months and thousands of hours basically hammering away. We methodically went through the keyboard and mouse inputs and essentially broke them down, figured out how all of that would map and translate to the controller. And then once we got it all done on paper, after many months, we started prototyping, we started iterating, we started playing what worked, what didn't work, started throwing things out, bringing stuff back. So it was just a constant phase of development where we were just trying and experimenting until we landed on what you see here today. And we're really happy. The team, kudos to all the teams, our partner teams that worked on this. We have something that is truly amazing. And honestly, I've said this before. If you watch the videos, as an RTS player, I should say, as an RTS developer that's worked in the genre for about 29 years now, I actually prefer to play with the controller.
Well, let's get back in the hot seat then. Do some movements for us. I want to see. Do the thing again where you select all the villagers.
So I press up on the D-pad.
Go on. Oh, there we go.
Which is super awesome. If you think about it, it's like
so good.
And that's what I love about the controller is everything on the D-pad is at your fingertips. It's you no longer have two input devices. Everything's been focused down to one. And we've gone in, we've intelligently designed the controller in such a way that it just makes everything feel really intuitive, natural. And why I say that is because that carries through across both products, Age 2 and Age 4. So if you're an Age 2 player and you're like, I'm going to go download Age 4 right now.
Which you should, if you haven't, by the way.
Absolutely. You're going to be able to pick up the controller and start playing right away, and it's going to feel, you're going to feel right at home. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can play this without having to relearn it. No, that was intentionally done because this blueprint that we have was designed so not only in the present is it awesome, but we can also carry it forward into the future with other iterations. So I got am I getting attacked by the AI? Look at that, I'm talking.
Here we are chatting and you're under fire.
Yeah, so what I want to show off are a couple cool innovations. These are absolutely critical to players out there. The first one is called the Villager Priority System, and this is key. I love this system with a passion, and I got to say, this is actually a new innovative feature for the genre as a whole. I was saying to our creative director, I'm like, how did we not think of this 10 years ago? and we laugh about it. But that's how cool of a feature it really is. So how it works is you essentially bring up this really cool radial. You hold down the left trigger, press an RS, and it brings up this radial. And this radial has a bunch of different presets that are broken up into various kind of like pie chart-like fashions. These are all weighted based on resource type. So
instead of dragging and dropping individual folks as they come out the village, it's just already managed.
This is where it gets really good. I got it all set up. So, oh my God, that's amazing. So we're gonna focus in on this economic one, but if you can use these presets. They were designed by our pro players on our team. We have some basic ones that if you're like me, you can just kind of set it and go. But depending on phase of gameplay, you can actually shift in and out of presets based on if I need more gold, need more stone.
Well, that's end game is when you need more gold. You don't really need it at start,
And you can pivot your villagers accordingly, and this governance system will take care of all that for you. Now, of course, if you're super pro, you can go in.
Which we are.
Yeah.
We are.
You can go in and customize your own VPS settings.
Okay.
So you have a custom setting for the pro players, or your average, individuals like myself, or your presets, which are more geared towards me. And let me show everybody how this works, because this is awesome. So I'm going to select the economic preset down here, very basic, straightforward. Click a button, and you watch all those idle villagers.
Off they go.
They're put to work.
There you
and let
go.
me show you an amazing pairing. So you take the villager priority system and you combine it with a new feature that we added to Age of Empires 4 on the Xbox, which is auto-train villagers on your TC. So now you get auto-train villagers going, and essentially you'll be booming in no
You're
time.
just showing off now.
And it's awesome. So these features, made perfect sense to pair these two.
Yeah.
And anybody out there, try it out. You're gonna love it. Once you can't go back. I was playing the PC the other day, and we're working on PC, iterating and changing things. I'm like, I had so much wood. I'm like, why are my villagers collecting wood? I'm like, oh gosh, I forgot. I'm on the PC, not the console, and you got to manually go in. But people, players love that level of micro. So we want to make sure that we give player the agency to do either or. This system really helps bolster the console experience. So. And that's why we added it. And Age of Empires 2 is the first one to add it. We brought the system in. We've made some additional tunings to it to make it work even better. And over time, you're just going to see the system in the Age series just grow and grow and just become super awesome.
Absolutely love it.
I got one more. Do we have time?
Oh, of course we've got time. All the time in the world.
So another feature that we added to Age of Empires Xbox was the ability to build anywhere you want without having to select a villager. This is key. So normally in the past, you had to select a villager and bring up the command bar on the PC. It's in the bottom.
Yep.
I didn't show this earlier. Gosh darn it. And here, this is the build radial. So let me talk about it now. This is the build radial. And on the console, we've broken up the build features across 4 different categories. You have economy, defense, military, and age up. So, and I'll back out of that, bring it back up again. And all of this is easily accessible through the D-pad. Purposely designed so players eventually can map all this in their brains to, I'll just go to the economy and eventually get it. So very well done. So with the site menu system, no longer do you have to select a villager. You can simply say, cursor over this resource pile, hit the right trigger, and it's going to bring up the right structure that you can place at that particular pile.
And then the way that you've weighted the villagers to work, people will go build it, and then they'll go mine it.
One villager will automatically be assigned, and it'll start building. And the great thing is, once this villager is done, the VPS system will capture that villager and put it back to work.
Oh my days.
So it's super awesome. And of course, that's with resource piles, so it's context sensitive on demand. You can also cursor over the terrain, bring up the menu, go to your build system, and it brings up the villager radio. And at that point, say I want to build more military structures, simply select the military structure, build one, and it's going to select the nearby villager, and off you go. So again, some really awesome niceties that we added to the game to just further bolster the console experience and reduce APM on the player.
So good. Now, there might be some people in chat who saw the news yesterday as well, who might be brand new to this whole experience, and there is a tutorial that's been added called Rise of the King. I wonder if we could just touch on that very quickly.
Absolutely. So the Rise of the King tutorial was created for the Xbox experience. It's broken up across 5 different missions, and it was designed to teach players the basics, the core, your core inputs, your basic age concepts, as well as teach players the fundamentals like base building, resource management, and of course the biggie, combat. So it takes players through all of these different phases of gameplay across 5 missions. Now, we didn't want to just build an onboarding experience that was do this, do that. We wanted something that was narratively driven and tied into the historical component that we created for Age of Empires 4. So we decided to create a prelude to the main campaign of the game, which follows William the Conqueror starting in 1047, and it takes you all the way up to 1066 with a landing in England up to the Battle of Hastings.
There it is.
So when you move into the main campaign, you'll actually start off right where you left off in the tutorial.
Oh, you lot are well smart. Well done. So the Xbox mantra that we all know and love is very much play how you want, when you want, and wherever you want. And that's very important because now we've enabled 2 and 4 of the Age franchise on Xbox consoles. How does it feel to be continuing to support that mantra?
It's awesome. It's an opportunity for us to get Age in the hands of millions of new gamers around the world that may never have the opportunity to experience this game. Always wanted to experience this game, but for whatever reason, they couldn't. So now, through Game Pass and Xbox, they can go online, they can download it, and have a great experience. And so for us, it's an opportunity, a chance for players to play on the platform they want and play comfortably on the input device that they want.
And comfortably on the sofa as
on
well.
The sofa, which, by the way,
sofa
is super awesome.
It's pretty good. Chat, by the way, I want to know, hands up in chat if you have got it installed, because I want to see everyone just get very, very excited. It has been a little bit of time since it's been announced, so fingers crossed you have. But before we go, I must ask, because I'm also very excited. I hear you've got a big announcement for us, something you want to share, maybe?
I am thrilled.
Thrilled
and have the privilege of being able to announce to everyone around the world that the biggest expansion released for Age of Empires 4 is coming soon. It's called The Sultan's Ascend.
It's a good name.
Packed with a ton of content, and it's going to take players on an epic journey through the Middle East. Now, I can say stay tuned. That's all I can say at this time. So
sorry, chat.
We're going to release more information very shortly, as well as details on how you can go onto your favorite platform and wishlist this baby up. So
fantastic.
Super excited, and please, that's good. The expansion's awesome.
I cannot wait to see more. Cannot wait to hear more. Chris, I also want to know, when you go home and continue the skirmish, I want to hear how the fight goes.
Oh,
you do it, all right?
Probably going to go terribly.
Nah, I believe in you. I believe in you. Well, thanks again for joining us. And chat, please do not forget, you can play Age of Empires 4 Anniversary Edition on Xbox right now. You didn't think I'd be saying that a few days ago, with Xbox Game Pass, as well as PC Game Pass if you haven't tried it out yet. Coming up next, I'm going to be chatting with the big man himself, Phil Spencer, so get mega excited. But first, it made a splash on Opening Night Live, so let's check it out right now. This is the latest from Starfield.
Play it day one with Xbox Game Pass.
It is my distinct pleasure to welcome CEO of Microsoft Gaming, Mr. Phil Spencer, to the stage. How are you, my dear?
I'm well. How are you? It's good to be here.
I am so good.
How's your first day of Gamescom?
I mean, it's been exciting. I've had a walk around. I've looked at some things, but I've mostly just been sitting here talking Diablo and Age, and now to you. So it's like
I saw the Age.
Yeah,
demo,
kind of like a 10 out of 10.
Who was
day.
out here for Diablo?
Diablo, it was Rod and Chris. We're out here.
Roderick was here.
Roderick, indeed.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, good vibes. I want to start by saying that the last time we were together, we were sat in the Bethesda London office planning to steal loads of stuff because we're loads of cool
Are we
stuff
saying
behind
planning
us.
because we don't want people to know that we
yes,
did?
Well, you've said it now, so I was protecting us.
I still have my stuff.
Well, every time I talk to you, I always ask what you're playing. So I want to know what you're playing and why is it still Vampire Survivors?
No. Well, I am playing Vampire Survivors, so I got all the achievements.
Obviously, yeah.
But now they have couch co-op, and I'm playing with my wife. My wife, Kelly, who doesn't play a ton of video games.
Yep.
So the fact that we can play couch co-op and she's enjoying it, like I'm all in.
As well. Yeah,
so what I'm playing right now on console, I'm playing a lot of Remnant 2. I really like Remnant 2.
Yep.
It's a great game to play with friends. I had my ROG Ally on the way out here. I'm playing a game called Fist, which is in Game Pass.
Yep.
It's a really nice platformer. I'm playing Brotato. Have you played Brotato?
This is also the first I've heard of it, so please tell me more. What is that?
So Brotato's not on Xbox.
Okay.
I'll say yet, but I don't have any. Well, it would be great to get on Xbox. It's a Steam game. It's kind of like, let's say it's inspired by Vampire Survivors.
Oh, I see.
But you play as a
You have a
potato.
type.
Yes, yeah, I'm very simple.
Yeah.
I have a small brain. So one stick, move around. But it's a fun game. So I'm playing some Brotato. I just finished, what did I just finish last? Bramble, have you played this game?
No, I've had it recommended a bunch though. Yeah, it's because it's a nice short playthrough, isn't it? As well?
But it's kind of a demented game. Like
A
it starts off
game.
demented, yeah. It starts off very cute,
Yeah.
and you think, oh, like this is awesome, and then it like goes into some very crazy,
And it
great game,
zags.
great game, but it's like some very dark, let's just say dark places.
Okay. I'll get it on the download queue. That sounds
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it's
Wonderful. So we're going to focus on Gamescom now. We're going to stop flapping our gums and actually talk. We're in Gamescom, quite literally surrounded by Xbox fans.
50,000 square feet
Yeah.
of Xbox booth.
It's pretty good. And
Biggest ever.
This is the first time in a while you've stepped on it as well. So I want to know why it's so important that Xbox has showed up so big this year.
Well, being here, being anywhere, but being in Europe with our customers, with players, with the creators that are here. I did a creator get together both last night, today, met with some partners. It's, it's these moments where the industry comes together, where we can talk to each other, that the consumers can come in, the players can come in, put their hands on games. I just think it's critically important. Obviously, COVID messed up a bunch of things. That's in the rearview mirror. So when we had the opportunity this year to go big at Gamescom, we said, let's go. The other thing that's awesome in the booth is how much third-party support that's here, right? Like Ed Boon's games here, Mortal Kombat's here. We have the DLC for Cyberpunk's here. Like it's just awesome to see how many of our partners, Rod's games here, Diablo, how many of the third-party support on the floor. It's an important thing for us as a platform. And it's just nice to get reconnected back with the community here.
Yeah. And then Starfield over, I feel like I'm showing everyone over
I can't see it. I can't see it. It's too small.
Well, it is actually technically massive, to correct you there. And we're only a week away from early access. So how exciting is it seeing this game coming to Xbox and we're so close now?
Yeah, we've been working on it for a long time. I've known about it for even before we acquired ZeniMax. So it's been great to see Todd and the team work more closely with them than we ever have on any game. There aren't that many moments where we get to launch a new IP that has the amount of buzz and anticipation that Starfield does. A lot of games you'll launch that are new IP and then maybe they build into their strength. But like there is just a crazy amount of anticipation. And the thing that I love is the confidence that the team has right now. Like putting out review codes 2 weeks before launch, because it's a big game. And I'll be the first to admit, the first 3 to 4 hours are a little bit hunt and peck, figure out like, well, what am I actually doing? Then you get on a side quest or something and like the game just like blows up in terms of its epic scale. So I love the fact that the team is so confident in giving reviewers time with the game before they're actually reviewing or just talking about what they think of the game.
Yeah, and just behind that, in the rearview mirror, if you will, kind of, I think that's how it works. Forza Motorsport's over there, and that's out not too long after Starfield, is it?
That's right. That's October. I got We did a take home 2 weeks ago where we got the kind of the opening of the game. Looks fantastic. I'm a huge motorsport fan.
Yep.
And I'd say Turn 10 for us for a long time in our first party has really been a technical showcase. Like Chris Tector, the team on the tech side, the stuff that they get the most out of the hardware, I think, of any of our first party teams. They just like, that's their focus, along with building a great racing simulator. And the game looks fantastic. And I can't wait for people to get to play. The ray tracing on track looks great. Giving people some options. You'll see all that as they kind of talk about more of the game. But Motorsport is tried like something that one of those franchises I've played since the beginning, and I can't wait for the full release.
Huh?
Yeah,
it's Motorsport is chef's kiss.
Well, and like kudos to Turn 10. They started with Motorsport, expanded to Horizon, so now they built like a sibling franchise to Motorsport.
Yep.
They've just done such a really good job of growing the relevance of Forza, both for simulation and arcade players. Great job.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Phil, I know one of the things in chat, and many of the fans really appreciate about you, is how much you love to play the games themselves. So I know just over here, you can't see behind me, we've got the Stalker 2 demo, and you've taken that for a spin as well. It's been 16 years since the original, so can you tell us what stood out to you?
Yeah, Stalker, if you played the first game, has kind of a unique setting and story, and it's really nice to see what they've done in this build of continuing the lore of what Stalker is about, what your role is in the world, and kind of how the world invites you into what your role is and your kind of task. I'm trying to do this without kind of spoiling too much. But,
you can spoil if you want.
No, it's their game. Like I don't want to do that. But I'll also say, they're a dev that spends a lot of time perfecting the game in terms of the technology. I think they're still on that track. Yeah. Like they're still, obviously the game's not done. So it's, but yeah, I just love that they've done a good job moving the Stalker kind of world forward, but being very tried and true to what Stalker's about.
Yeah, for sure. And to be totally honest, even under the best circumstances in games development, it's super tough. But for GSC, obviously, it's a bit more complex, the situation they've got there. So I want to know, what does it mean to you to see these guys get here and get a demo out of the door?
Yeah, I've stayed in touch with the team over the years, and especially as you say, like the last couple of years, it's an emotional thing, right? Like you almost feel hollow asking them about how their game is.
Yeah, of course.
When you think about the world and what that they live in, and what that studio has gone through and really continues to go through. I think for them, I see, and they've talked about this when I've talked to them, that building the game has kind of been a refuge in a way, and it's cool to see that. I hope it never gets replicated again in terms of something that has to happen. But I'll say for the team, the fact that they're here, I was playing, they were literally pushing a new build right as I was playing that build. So their attention to wanting to put their best foot forward, even under the most difficult circumstances. I have a ton of confidence in them, and they're on that journey. But it's it's an emotional thing when you're talking to a team that's going through. I don't want to talk about it in past tense, what that team is going through. So it's really special to me that they're here and that gaming can be part of how they're getting through it.
Yeah, for sure. And as well as being here, there are so many communities for so many different games.
Yeah.
The RX was, you've got Sea Thieves. I'm doing it again. Sea Thieves over there. You've got an ESO over there.
They can't see it,
No, I know. I'm just
There's actually nothing over
I'm
there.
telling you where they all are.
It's an empty, there's nothing here. And you're just
it's not a
pointing
green screen, it's an illusion.
The grounded communities over there, it's actually not.
But what's it like for you to see all of these communities come together?
Community and gaming, to me, are linked. It's
100%.
From my early days of literally going to the arcade. I'm the old guy, but that's the only way I could play that and Pong at my house. That's how I played video games. And there was a community in the arcade of hey, what's the new hot console? Not video game console, but actually arcade console cabinet that you're going to go play. And I love that today those communities, they're still physical. Like you asked, why are we here at Gamescom? Because we have a fan fest tonight.
Indeed,
it's going to be awesome with the local community and the people that are here, but also the virtual communities. And I think it's one of the unique things in video games, that video games can connect people across geographies, across races, religions. Like, it is just a connector of people. And when it's a game like a Sea of Thieves, like a Grounded, like a Flight Sim, so many of our games now have these Elder Scrolls Online, which has a big, over there, has a big presence on our show floor.
And they've got a really nice table in there as well.
They do that big round table.
A really nice table. It's another one of the things on my list to see if I can pilfer. I won't lie to you.
We should steal that.
Yeah, we should.
But the thing, I also want to make sure on the community side, it's not just about multiplayer games. Like you find, like think about Skyrim.
Yeah.
You know, Skyrim has an amazing community around it, and it's not because there's a bunch of PvP or PvE, right? It's people come together for their shared love of the world and the characters and the lore and their role in that. I just think that's a very special part of gaming, and it's a privilege, I guess, for us at Xbox to have some franchises that are a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, what we're seeing here is, I think it fully opens to the public tomorrow and all.
It's the sweatshop tomorrow.
Oh yeah, this is going to really pop off then.
In here, it's going to be warm.
You got the good day to come and sit here.
I'm here tomorrow. I'm here.
Well,
but yeah, like do people know? Like today is what, the press day, right? Is that what they call it? I don't know if that has an official name. I should know, but I don't know. And then tomorrow, the consumers, the players, come in. Have you ever seen like when they open the
running?
It's ridiculous.
And then eventually at some point, I'm going to stop pointing, but the escalators, and they get so busy.
Yeah.
Every time I come to Gamescom with someone new, I tell them you have to see the running when it opens and the escalators when they're full. It's great.
It's awesome to be back. And I think they feel like this might be one of the biggest Gamescoms ever.
It feels it already, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's kudos to the team here who's kept this going. They went virtual for a while, but now we're here back, and there's so many fans and players here. It's like just such a special time.
And it's special for Xbox as well, as we've mentioned a few times on the show already, that it's the 10th anniversary of ID at Xbox.
I have my ID at Xbox.
There it is. He's sporting it. He knew what he was doing.
Wear it.
I'd love for you to reflect on any memories or moments you have from the introduction of ID and how it's gone over the past 10 years.
I'm going to start with a couple things.
Yeah.
One, we always have discussions internally when new things are going to happen on the console. And there's always some different kind of feelings about the impact. When free-to-play came to console, it'll be the end of the console if free-to-play comes to console. Some people think it is. But, like, you know, clearly the console's still there and free-to-play happened. ID at Xbox. Well, when we have unmanaged partners that are building games on Xbox, what does that mean for a console? Because we started with this silly thing where publishers had 2 slots of arcade games that they could go do. It was like a silly policy in Xbox. Opening it up and allowing anybody who submits and actually has good intent to build a game on the platform has led to some of the best games that have, people forget like that Fortnite actually came through ID at Xbox. When you ask about like some of the special moments, I have to go to games from places where we'd never seen games from Xbox. I remember going to the Brazil game show and meeting the devs behind Aritana. I'm probably missing the pronunciation. But it's this, I think it was the first Brazilian developed Xbox game. And it came through ID at Xbox, and this team of guys, we were in Sao Paulo, and they came together, and I met them at the show, and it was so cool just to think, it used to be there were like 3 places on the planet where games were built. And now you have games coming from all over the place, and people tell their stories through their lived experience and their world.
It's totally different stories, as you say, around the world. Yeah.
Now, whether it's explicit in like, I'm going to do a game about Brazil, or I'm going to do a game about something else, but through the lens of what I see in the world. Exactly. And that's the thing, whether it was like Candleman, which I think was the first Chinese developed ID at Xbox game. Like, I always love when we're finding new ID at Xbox games from new places and new partners. And I just think that's like, if we're going to find new players, we're going to have more creative, and the mix of those two things, ID has been fundamental. And 10 years ago, announced at Gamescom.
10 years.
Yeah,
Wowzers.
that's how old I am. Feels like yesterday, or I don't remember it. I should say I don't remember.
I don't remember actually. You were 10 years old then.
No.
That's a great job for a 10-year-old that you've got.
But it's like that it was 10 years ago. And I remember though, like, trepidation, what's going to happen when unmanaged developers can build console games? You know what happened? Some amazing things happened.
It did. So another thing that you talk about a lot as well is when you can play games whenever, however, and wherever you want. And I know that's something you really want to give to fans however possible. So I want to know what that commitment looks like, both at Gamescom and maybe the months ahead, what that story is going to be.
The critical thing we look at Teams Xbox in terms of our success is how many players.
Yeah.
How many players do we have? And even more and more, how much are people playing? Like, do we have a platform that has games for kind of all days of all hours of the day? Sometimes you're playing with your family, and what can I do? Sometimes it's just me time, and I want to go do things. And how many players show up? We look at our monthly active players, our daily active players. And when I say on Xbox there, whether you're playing on the cloud and you're streaming to a device that we don't know anything about, whether you're playing on a PC, and as Microsoft, we know something about the PC, or you're playing on one of our consoles. Like, those are all Xbox players. Or, like, flying over here, I'm playing on my ROG Ally on the airplane. And I think about that as my Xbox away from home, or my Steam Deck. Like, I want those things to feel as connected and as complete as an Xbox experience as any piece of hardware that we build. We will continue to focus on hardware. It's an important part of our team and what we can go do. But I don't want our hardware to be a limitation on who can actually feel like they're part of the Xbox community. If you buy hardware from us, we're going to do an awesome job supporting you. We want to make sure great games are there. If you have the device that you want to bring and be part of Xbox, we also want that to be 100% great on Xbox. And it's, as you said, it's putting the player's decision on where they want to play at the center of it.
And it's just there for them, whichever one they want to grab at that time.
And not only is it there, my save game moves with me, my community is there, so I can make progress on any platform I want to play on, and I can grind my characters, I can make my way through the story anywhere I've been. It's one of the best things about Starfield, pointing at it.
That's over there.
I've been moving, I play on work, on my PC, when I go home, I sit on my console and I go play, and it's just a continuous experience for me, and everything moves. It's fantastic.
Amazing. So I also want to know, while we are here, is there anything you're particularly excited about trying, either on the booth, off the booth? What have you got your eyes on?
Well, Stalker 2 was one, so it was great to get to sit and talk to the team yesterday and just connect, right, and see how they're doing. I have this funny thing with Ed Boon, where Ed and I have known each other for a long time, head of the team behind Mortal Kombat, but we tend to cross ourselves on stage all the time. It happened last night at OLN.
Congratulations last night, by the way. Smashed
But
it.
accepting an award that team did on like an Xbox.
Yeah, but
I didn't do it.
you accepted it so well, Phil. Well done.
Thanks. I'm very good at coming out with a trophy and a microphone and accepting an award for work that other people did. And that team did awesome work. But I want to get over with Mortal Kombat. We had the same thing at, I still call it E3, though no one else does, but that June event, our showcase, but also I think he was in Keeley's, the Play Days thing, which was great. But we tend to fly by. So I saw him on stage, because he was on, I think, right after me as I was coming off stage, which is how we normally spend time together. But really great third parties here, and I know I'm supposed to pick some obscure indie game, but I want to sit down with Ed and get my hands on Mortal Kombat, so I'm hoping I get to do that.
I'm going to recommend to you, if you haven't yet, go play Little Kitty Big City. I have not. That's the one
I'm not really a cat person, though.
Phil!
No.
You have
Are we
to
going to fight?
spoil it, don't you? Because I have to thank you now for the interview, and you've just gone and said you're not a cat person.
I'm a dog person. My dog's name is Oogie.
Oogie?
Oogie, O-O-G-I-E.
Oh, okay.
He's a rescue.
Maybe I'll let you off
He's
then.
the most awesomest dog ever.
Okay, fine.
But yeah. And so, Big Kitty, Big City, what would say?
Well, imagine if it was Big Kitty, Little City. That's a game.
Yeah.
Someone make that one. Well, Phil, we got to wrap there. You're absolutely fantastic as always. Thank you for joining us.
You are.
No, you are. Enjoy the rest of your show.
Thank you.
Don't steal too much stuff, and I'm sure we'll speak to you soon. But now it's over to Benny and Maxi to close out the end of the show.
That is day one of our Xbox Gamescom coverage in the books, but don't worry, we're just getting started.
That's right, over the next 2 days, we've got more from the new Cyberpunk 2077 expansion, Phantom Liberty. We'll scare ourselves silly with Alan Wake 2, and we get hyped with a tour of this massive Xbox booth.
And then day three, we sail the high seas with Sea of Thieves. We're going to party with party animals and check out City Skylines 2 from high above Cologne, this city. All that and so much more, so join us right back here tomorrow and Friday. Until then, happy gaming. See you then. Macht's gut. Ciao.
Bye.
Gasoline, move fast, rescue McQueen. Just hit 'em
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Nick930, and today I want to share with you the complete history of Metal Gear.
What's that?
It is a revolutionary mobile nuclear missile system.
A nuclear-equipped walking battle tank.
A kind of Metal Gear, if you will.
Metal Gear.
This will be a sneaking mission. It must not be seen by the enemy. Is that clear?
Got it. I'm ready to go. We're out of time! You've got to stop that thing!
It's been a while, brother.
Liquid! You've got to stop him before it's too late to track him down.
Look, our ways of thinking might be different. To me, you're still a legend. A hero.
I'm no hero. Never was. Never will be.
Now I'll finish the work that Father began.
I will surpass him.
I will destroy him!
What's wrong, Snake? Snake, are you okay? Snake! Kept you waiting, huh?
Metal Gear is a third-person stealth-action video game series created by Hideo Kojima and the gaming division of a Japanese entertainment holdings corporation called Konami. In practically each game, players assume the role of a legendary soldier codenamed Snake, who is tasked with infiltrating enemy-occupied territory with nothing but a sneaking suit and a pack of smokes. Though thanks to his advanced training, he's able to acquire a number of helpful tools and powerful weapons to deal with the greatest of threats. Whether that be a squad of supernatural soldiers or a 40-foot-tall, nuclear-equipped bipedal tank. The series has been celebrated for decades thanks to its rich storytelling, its polished gameplay mechanics, and its unmistakable style. So much so that even those who don't consider themselves gamers will likely already be familiar with at least some aspects of it. What's more, the series is also responsible for helping to popularize stealth action in the video game industry, and also helped to usher forth the age of the AAA game. So how has this nearly 35-year-old video game franchise changed since its initial debut? And where could it go next? Well, to answer that, let's begin by first looking at how the series was conceived back in the late 1980s.
Você empreendedor de Paulista, você sabia que somente uma em cada 5 empresas em Pernambuco sobrevive aos primeiros anos? E que a escolha do local da sua loja, comércio ou escritório geralmente é o fator determinante para que você tenha sucesso no seu negócio? Você precisa acertar na escolha do local para o seu negócio. E se este vídeo chegou até você, é porque provavelmente você pretende iniciar um novo empreendimento ou expandir seus negócios. E por isso quero te mostrar uma excelente oportunidade. Paulista agora conta com o Pátio Aurora Open Mall, considerado a evolução do comércio de rua e dos grandes shoppings. Aqui, seu negócio estará dentro do Vila Aurora, que é um moderno bairro planejado no centro de Paulista, além de fácil acesso para ciclistas e pedestres, amplo estacionamento e um mix completo de comércios e serviços. Se você quer garantir que sua empresa esteja presente na melhor localização comercial de Paulista, não perca mais tempo. Venha conhecer o Pátio Aurora Open Mall, o endereço certo para o seu negócio. Clique para se cadastrar e faça parte do grupo seleto de empresas que farão sucesso em Paulista. Vem pra Carrilho!
Neste momento, milhões de crianças sofrem de desnutrição severa. Elas precisam de alimentos e nutrientes vitais. Algumas ficam tão fracas que mal conseguem ficar em pé. A cada ano, mais de 1 milhão de crianças menores de 5 anos morrem de desnutrição. Com o seu apoio, podemos salvar vidas com uma solução muito simples. Este alimento terapêutico contém vitaminas e nutrientes essenciais que ajudam as crianças a se recuperarem da desnutrição. É fácil de usar e as famílias não precisam de água ou qualquer preparo especial. Doe agora. Ajude o UNICEF a entregar esta simples solução que salva a vida de milhões de crianças. Acesse doeunicef.org.br ou ligue 0800 545 5130. Com apenas R$1 por dia, Podemos fornecer 20 sachês de alimento terapêutico todos os meses para as crianças que mais precisam. Em poucas semanas de tratamento, elas podem se recuperar totalmente. Graças a pessoas como você, ajudamos a salvar milhões de crianças todos os anos. Por favor, dê um passo simples. Seja um doador e ajude-nos a continuar salvando vidas. A cada segundo sem tratamento, uma criança corre o risco de morrer. Doe agora. Acesse doeunicef.org.br ou ligue 0800 545 5130. Para salvar uma vida, basta um passo. Obrigado.
In the early 1980s, the arcade video game industry had entered into its golden age. Sci-fi shoot-'em-ups like Space Invaders and Asteroids proved to be immensely popular, and inspired many soon-to-be legendary game designers to throw their own hats into the ring, only further contributing to the growth of the medium. There was Takeru Fujiwara, creator of Capcom's Sweet Home, who played a critical role in popularizing survival horror. Silas Warner, the mind behind one of the earliest stealth action experiences. And of course, Shigeru Miyamoto, whose groundbreaking creations helped to bring the video game industry back from the brink. Meanwhile, tech companies around the world raced to establish a firm foothold in the emerging interactive home entertainment space, with a swarm of 8-bit gaming platforms flooding the market, overwhelming American consumers and inevitably triggering the infamous market crash of 1983. But somewhat unaffected by this crash was the computer gaming industry. Platforms like the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum saw large success in Western territories throughout the course of the mid-80s, while the MSX platform dominated in Japan and parts of Europe. Hoping to capitalize on this opportunity, a Japanese entertainment company called Konami began to distance themselves from arcade cabinet design and established the MSX home computer division within their offices in Osaka, Japan. In entered 22-year-old Hideo Kojima, who despite studying economics in college, decided to instead upset the societal norms of 1980s Japan and pursued a career in the entertainment industry. Kojima had long been fascinated with the art of cinema and storytelling. At a young age, he would spend his evenings with his father, watching all manner of film, and was even encouraged to stay up late at night to see each movie through to its conclusion. He spent most of his teenage years writing stories and screenplays, in hopes that he might one day win an award for them and then be given an opportunity to enter into the highly competitive film industry. But during his time in college, Kojima became enamored with the emerging video game medium, and spent many of his off hours playing Miyamoto's Super Mario Bros., and a murder mystery adventure called Portopia Renzoku Satsuchin Jaiken. Then, following his graduation from college, he applied for a job at Konami's Osaka office, hoping to break into the expanding video game development space and build his very own experiences for Nintendo's Famicom. But when he finally received the offer, he was assigned to work for Konami's MSX division instead. While grateful for the opportunity, he couldn't help but be disappointed. He was determined to make a name for himself, but the MSX's technical limitations made that goal seem less obtainable. His first project with the MSX team was a sequel to an action-adventure platforming game called Antarctic Adventure. Hideo, serving as the assistant designer, contributed a great deal to the creation of this game, allowing it to stand out drastically from its predecessor. The first game was pretty bare bones, with players simply needing to dodge a few obstacles along some glaciers. But the sequel offered a plethora of changes, including power-ups, varied environments, and even alternate endings dependent on the player's performance. Konami was impressed. Kojima had no prior experience after all, and it became clear within only the first few months that he possessed a natural gift for this type of thing. So, to test him further, they gave him something a bit more challenging to work on, and had him take over as the lead designer for a side-scrolling platformer called Lost World. But when Kojima presented this overly ambitious design document to the executives at Konami, they rejected the changes and decided to redirect Kojima towards making a military combat title instead. Something that would be in the same vein as popular arcade shooters at the time like Capcom's Commando. Disheartened, but still determined, Kojima began to piece together another design document. He recognized early on that the MSX's biggest handicap was its inability to display more than 4 horizontal sprites at once, making the large battle sequences associated with games like Commando impossible. So, to circumvent this issue, he thought of a creative solution. The game would still have soldiers, but rather than feature non-stop open combat across a scrolling environment, why not give players a chance to avoid the combat altogether? He based this concept strongly around his love for the 1963 Sturgis film The Great Escape, where a band of POWs attempt to escape from a Nazi prison camp during World War II, and he aimed to deliver that same tension of almost being caught into a fully interactive experience. By doing this, Kojima would be able to make even a single combative soldier on screen feel more intimidating than the dozens and other, more conventional shooter games at the time. Kojima then presented his design document to the executives at Konami, with the working title Metal Gear Intruder. But to his dismay, it too was rejected. They had asked Kojima to deliver an exciting action experience, and were concerned that by forcing players to constantly avoid confrontation, the game's hero may come off as cowardly and wouldn't appeal to Western audiences. Kojima took his rejected design and reapproached the concept. He remained convinced that this new stealth action route was the way to go. But rather than have a game over screen appear when the player was caught, he incorporated a new alert phase, giving players a chance to fight back or flee if they wanted to. The new alert phase was likened to that of Pac-Man, offering a fresh change-up to the pacing that would keep the player invested for longer. And because of this, Konami agreed to greenlight production of Kojima's directorial debut, Metal Gear. Development for Metal Gear was handled by a remarkably small team of programmers and artists. While Kojima handled the core game design and writing, a trio of programmers led by Hiroyuki Fukui worked within the confines of the slightly newer MSX2 hardware to commit Hideo's ideas to code. This required them to piece together a detection system from scratch, along with enemy patrol routes that would need to reset with each screen refresh. Meanwhile, a pair of artists sculpted the pixelated halls of Metal Gear's industrial environment, using a limited color palette of only 16 colors, while also ensuring each character and level design didn't come off too much like a childish cartoon. They generated hundreds of interconnected mazes, using simplistic geometric shapes and angled perspectives to help give the walls a perceivable depth. And then they worked with the programming team to balance out enemy patrol pathing and obstacles without overstepping the MSX2's rendering limitations. Meanwhile, lead sound designer Iku Mizutani and his team in the Konami Square Wave Club formulated the game's sound effects and musical score, enhancing the action further with a dynamic soundtrack that would alter based on the enemy alert status. It was a bold step for video game sound design, as most titles during that time period just utilized a single audio track per level to save on memory, but it proved to be a critical component of Metal Gear's unique atmosphere. As these various development teams pieced together the gameplay experience, Hideo worked to formulate the game's narrative. The core plot was simple. A spy infiltrates a secure facility, saves some hostages, and stops a dangerous superweapon from destroying the world. But even this seemingly straightforward narrative was uncommon for its time, and would serve as a jumping-off point for one of gaming's most beloved stories. Finally, in the summer of 1987, after nearly a year of development, Konami released the original Metal Gear, exclusively for the MSX2 platform. Metal Gear takes place in the then futuristic year of 1995, where a highly organized paramilitary force has established a militant state in southern Africa called Outer Heaven. Fearful that this growing threat may possess nuclear capabilities, an American Special Forces unit called Foxhound is sent in to investigate. But after the unit's most skilled field agent, Gray Fox, is captured, rookie soldier Solid Snake is sent in after to rescue him, and to ascertain the whereabouts of the rumored superweapon, Metal Gear. Players assume the role of the rookie Snake as they infiltrate Outer Heaven and search for clues pertaining to Gray Fox and Metal Gear's whereabouts. Along the way, players will encounter a number of obstacles, mainly enemy sentries, security devices, and a band of powerful mercenaries, each with their own special quirks, and cheesy nicknames to go along with them. But as Snake learns more about Outer Heaven and its powerful nuclear-equipped bipedal weapon, the stakes are risen sharply, and it becomes clear that not everyone can be trusted. Without spoiling anything, Metal Gear's narrative was revolutionary for its time. Sure, RPGs in the late 80s and 90s had plenty of rich narratives woven in, But to have even a hint of that within the confines of an action-adventure game was highly unusual. On top of that, the game's big twist and clever fourth wall breaking would set the scene for the franchise moving forward. But of course, the real selling point back then for the original Metal Gear was not its story, but rather its highly unique gameplay design. Metal Gear, at its core, is a stealth action-adventure, where sneaking past enemies whenever possible is encouraged. Most of the game is played from a semi-top-down perspective, and tasks players with navigating Snake through maze-like level environments while avoiding detection from patrolling enemies. If Snake wanders into an enemy's line of sight, then a red exclamation mark will appear over the alerted guard, and the action will shift immediately to a fight or flight situation. Players can choose to either stay and fight off the alerted enemies, or alternatively they can run off the screen to reset the alert status completely. However, if the player triggers a base-wide alarm, things get a bit more challenging, as enemy reinforcements will appear in greater numbers, and escaping to the next room won't necessarily help most of the time. What's more, enemies in Metal Gear deal some serious damage, enough that a direct confrontation with multiple enemies at once will often end in the player staring at a game over screen. To help even the odds, players must be more patient in their approach, and make use of an assortment of various tools and weapons collected throughout the course of their adventure. Upon deployment, Snake is armed with nothing more than a pack of cigarettes and a radio transmitter to communicate with a support team. But if the player explores enough of the game world and is sure to backtrack and open previously locked doors, then they'll discover items that can make infiltration more manageable. These items include things like infrared goggles to spot laser beams, a mine detector to safely traverse minefields, and of course, the cardboard box, that can be used to hide directly in plain sight, so long as the player remains still when using it. In addition to these items, players can also select between a few firearms, each with their own distinct advantages and disadvantages. The handgun, for example, fires slowly, but will always fire in a straight line based on the player's orientation, whereas the SMG can fire fast, but it lacks the accuracy. Other notable weapons and items include a remote control missile launcher, useful for attacking enemies around corners, a silencer to quietly dispatch enemies at range, explosives to open up new paths, and most important of all, rations that can be eaten to replenish the player's health bar. Players can also increase their maximum health by locating a set number of POWs hidden throughout the game, incentivizing exploration even further. The entire experience was well ahead of its time in 1987, taking elements only just introduced by Metroid a year prior, and combining it with the stealth action that Silas Warner had attempted back in 1981. And the end result is a game that, remarkably, over 34 years later, is still enjoyable to play today. The original Metal Gear was met with a decent amount of praise upon its release, with many holding it up as one of the must-play titles on the MSX2 platform. Though, a few, like The Games Machine, did point out that the visuals were lagging behind the competition a fair amount, chalking it up more to the limitations of the hardware rather than the game designers themselves. But even still, Metal Gear proved to be a step in the right direction, and now that he had finally released his first game into the world, Kojima was eager to make something new, and entered into production on a Blade Runner-inspired graphic novel game soon after.
What does 3 p.m. mean for me exactly?
Well, it means the most for you.
Can you
be more specific? 3 p.m. often means licensing, specialized liquidity treatment, and enhanced payments, which can vary around the world.
That sounds like a lot of work.
No. That's why we're here.
And by we, you mean?
JP Morgan. For decades, we've helped clients around the world hold and transact third-party cash. We go beyond the transaction to help you identify new revenue streams and connect commercial considerations to your treasury ecosystem, so you can navigate this changing environment and achieve your e-commerce dreams.
Putz. Verde.
Tu pelo.
Maneiro, né? Te gusta?
El caos puede ser hermoso.
Calma, calma. De boa. Ai, por que eres assim de tenebrosa?
Calma, amigos. Soy yo. Adoro tu cabello.
Ah, sério? Ah, valeu, eu tava sentindo a vibe, sabe? Eu curti. Tipo, tava super verde quando eu pintei. Aí minha mãe soltou. Não é lindo, não?
As Kojima spent the better part of the next couple years on his new game, Konami looked at his past Metal Gear work and saw serious potential in bringing it over to Western audiences. The game was oozing with Western themes after all, from its Hollywood action-inspired hero to its more mature military-based elements. So, without Kojima and his programming team's knowledge, Konami transferred the source code of Metal Gear over to a small Famicom development team in their Tokyo office, and then instructed them to create a port of the game within a tight 3-month window. Overwhelmed, this small 5-person team got to work retrofitting the game's visual and audio design to function within the confines of the Famicom's capabilities, and even redesigned the intro so that it would stand apart from the original release. Due to time and hardware limitations, they even had to tweak the climactic battle against the TX-55 Metal Gear, replacing it with a far less exciting master computer instead. The end result was a game that, while similar, failed to capture the magic of the original MSX2 release, so much so that Kojima himself has disowned the port from the franchise. However, this didn't matter to Western audiences. Up until this point, they had never even heard of Metal Gear before, and the game's unusual stealth action mechanics, coupled with its addictive formula, helped it to stand out tremendously. Metal Gear on the NES quickly became a hit, selling significantly more than the original release, and Konami were quick to greenlight a follow-up. For the sequel, they assigned another internal development team, many of whom had just come off working on the third Castlevania, and pushed them to incorporate even more action-based elements into the gameplay, convinced that the old Commando formula would be received better by its target Western audience. Kojima, still unaware that the Metal Gear property was being continued without him, finally learned of this supposed sequel when talking to one of the programmers involved. According to an interview between Kojima and former MSX Magazine, Kojima was approached by this programmer during a train ride to Tokyo and asked why he wasn't leading the project. Kojima, surprised that a sequel was even being made, went home that evening and wrote up an entire design document for a true sequel to Metal Gear, and had it approved by Konami the following day. This was at the tail end of development for Snatcher, a project that had proven to be more difficult than he had initially anticipated. So much so that they were forced to abandon the last 2 acts of that game, leaving the story with a major cliffhanger that would never be resolved. Even so, Snatcher proved to be another success for Kojima, and with it finally out of the way, the team immediately turned their attention towards Metal Gear again, and how they could improve upon that original formula. But before this true sequel could ever see the light of day, Konami's NES team had completed work on their own project, and in the spring of 1990, they released Snake's Revenge, exclusively for the Nintendo Entertainment System in Western territories. Snake's Revenge, which is now considered to be non-canonical, takes place 3 years after the events of the original game, with a new threat emerging from an unnamed nation in the Middle East. Snake, along with a small team of allies, are tasked with infiltrating a hostile military installation, where they soon discover that a line of mass-produced Metal Gear tank units are being developed, along with a powerful new prototype Metal Gear that is capable of delivering a devastating nuclear attack worldwide. The gameplay is also fairly similar to the original games, with a focus on stealth action, exploration, and item management. Though this game did introduce a few new mechanics to help it stand out, including a knife to defeat sentries with a single melee attack, more variety in level environments, and even the ability to interrogate certain enemies for information, with successful interrogations contributing to the player's rank progression. Though despite these few changes, Snake's Revenge didn't fare quite as well as its predecessor. Sales were much lower, likely due to the lack of the name Metal Gear on the box art, and its visuals had started to show their age, especially with the Super Nintendo right around the corner. Still, it did at least receive some praise from Hideo Kojima himself, who has said on multiple occasions that, while not canon with the core storyline, he still enjoyed Snake's Revenge a great deal, and felt it properly utilized the characters he had introduced previously. But of course, it was the true Metal Gear sequel from Kojima's team that would inevitably steal the show, introducing a ton of fundamental changes to the gameplay formula that would transform the Metal Gear series forever. As I mentioned previously, Metal Gear 2's development began soon after Kojima had been informed of an unsanctioned sequel. Eager to carry out his own vision, Kojima pitched a sequel to Konami that would be tailor-made for the MSX, and within the first month, Kojima and his team had entered into full production, updating the visual design and enhancing the many gameplay mechanics that Kojima had felt needed improvement. Then, following a brief delay in the late months of development to assist with a Snatcher port, Kojima released the true next entry to the series, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, exclusive for Japanese audiences in the summer of 1990. Metal Gear 2 takes place 4 years after the original game, with the world's dominant superpowers attempting full denuclearization in pursuit of peace and prosperity. But after a crude oil shortage thrusts the world into economic turmoil, a rogue militant state in Asia called Zanzibar Land seizes control of the world's remaining nuclear arsenal and kidnaps a Czech biologist who had been developing a solution to the world's dependence on petroleum. With the world once again at the precipice of nuclear Armageddon, Snake is called out of retirement, this time serving under Foxhound's new commanding officer, Roy Campbell. The mission: infiltrate Zanzibar Land, rescue the Czech biologist being held captive, and disable the enemy's nuclear arsenal. From here, things begin to strongly resemble the format of the original Metal Gear. Players sneak around a heavily guarded fortress, search for keycards, rescue POWs and child soldiers, and deal with absurdly over-the-top bosses. But there's also a fair amount of subtle improvements incorporated into Metal Gear 2's narrative that help it to stand out. For one, Metal Gear 2 kicks off with a flashy cinematic intro cutscene, highly reminiscent of a Hollywood movie's intro sequence, something that was not at all common at that time. Additionally, there's more nuance to the characters themselves, especially Solid Snake, whose brooding, cynical personality is finally established thanks to the extended dialogue sequences he has with other characters. Other aspects introduced prior, like fourth wall breaking gameplay elements involving using the game's manual to decrypt secret codes, also make a return, perpetuating a trend that would soon become expected of the series. But one of Metal Gear 2's most important contributions, at least in regards to its story, is the major plot twist at the end, revealing the truth about Snake's origin and transforming the narrative from its cliché good versus evil into something a bit more complex, coincidentally in the exact same way that George Lucas's Empire Strikes Back had transformed the meaning of the original Star Wars only 10 years earlier. Meanwhile, Metal Gear 2's gameplay also features quite the overhaul, so much so that it would serve as the fundamental blueprint for the series moving forward. The general premise of the game remains the same as before. Players start with nothing but a pack of smokes, and need to sneak around enemies and acquire gear as they search for clues to help complete their mission. But now, players can make use of an on-screen radar to navigate through enemy territory more easily. The player appears as a blinking red dot in the center grid space that represents the current room shown on screen, while enemy soldiers appear as blinking white dots that can now be tracked even when they're in an adjacent room off-screen. This change allows players to see ahead of time whether they're going to run into an enemy when moving through a doorway, and also enables enemies to travel from room to room as well, which, along with their new cones of vision, makes use of the radar paramount to avoid detection. To help balance out this powerful tool further, enemy alert phases will automatically jam the radar, showing only the alert level and time remaining before it resets. If the player manages to escape the enemy's view for long enough, an evasion phase will begin, indicating that enemies are now searching the area. This adds a great new dimension to the game's stealth action, letting players essentially play hide and seek with the enemy, and Snake's new crouch and crawling maneuvers only add to this further. But crawling isn't only used to squeeze underneath small spaces. Players can also use this new ability to minimize the amount of sound they produce, as enemies can now hear the player when walking on certain noisy surfaces. Other changes include a more consistent visual style, removing the awkward 2D elevator screens from before, a redesign to the way card keys work, simplifying the process of opening doors in the late stages of the game, new ration types, each restoring varying amounts of health, and a number of new tools and gadgets like grenades, a Stinger missile launcher, night vision goggles, and a usable hiding place that's somehow even more absurd than Snake's signature cardboard box. Metal Gear 2's many improvements served to greatly evolve the Metal Gear series, though its contributions went largely unnoticed due to the game's limited distribution. Within the Japanese market, Metal Gear 2 was met with high critical acclaim. It was praised for its excellent storytelling, along with its much cleaner execution of its gameplay elements, with only minor complaints being directed towards its frequent reliance on backtracking. When the game finally did manage to receive a US port, it retroactively received unanimous praise from collectors and reviewers alike, 15 some years after its release. But long before players became aware of its existence, Metal Gear 2 would lay the groundwork for one of the most popular and influential video games in the history of the medium.
Seja esperto. Tenha Think You Care. Paz de espírito com Think You Care. LG Think You.
Following the partial success of Metal Gear 2, Kojima once more stepped away from his magnum opus, hoping to diversify his portfolio with titles outside of the Metal Gear universe. And because both versions of the Metal Gear sequel had underperformed, Konami no longer felt it necessary to invest in another in-house sequel, giving Kojima the chance to continue the story when he felt the time was right. During this hiatus, Kojima and his development team spent the early 90s working on a point-and-click adventure game that would marry Western 1980s science fiction with social commentary regarding anti-Asian sentiment born of films like Kaufman's Rising Sun. This project, titled Policenauts, would mark a distinct shift in creative control towards Kojima, whose storytelling capabilities he felt had been significantly limited by his lack of prior programming experience. With the help of a scripting engine he designed, he was now able to directly manipulate the game's musical cues and animations as he saw fit. He finally felt in control of his vision, and the resulting game was met with glowing reception within its limited Japanese release. Following this initial launch, Kojima's production team spent the course of the next year porting the title over to the CD-ROM-based 3DO interactive multiplayer console. The 3DO was initially marketed as the next big step for the console gaming space, with high-end graphics previously only achievable on PCs. Eager to take advantage of this, Kojima decided to take the Metal Gear series back out of retirement, and began to jot down ideas for a Metal Gear 3. But 3DO inevitably failed to live up to its lofty expectations, and was quickly edged out only a year later by Sony's groundbreaking PlayStation. Because of this, Metal Gear 3 was redirected to target a PlayStation release instead, and full production on the project began in the early months of 1995. Meanwhile, it's important to note that Konami was also evolving around this time frame. With the continued growth of its software development assets, Konami's corporate offices decided to set up a divisional organization, with several regional subsidiaries, each responsible for their own specialized intellectual properties. The studio in Tokyo, for example, became Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo, and had begun working on the survival horror series Silent Hill. The old Osaka office became Konami Computer Entertainment Osaka, and Kojima's team, previously known as Osaka Development Division No. 5, were transferred to a separate office in Tokyo, and were subsequently renamed into Konami Computer Entertainment Japan. With this studio refresh, Kojima's development team nearly tripled in size, with roughly 30-some developers and multiple units all responsible for different aspects of the game's design. Most notably, illustrator and lead graphic artist Yoji Shinkawa, who helped to reinvent the design of Metal Gear's iconic characters, with striking conceptual designs that have since become synonymous with the Metal Gear property. With Yoji's help, the programming and graphic design team were able to more properly realize Kojima's vision, and began to sculpt models with a level of visual fidelity that was simply unheard of at the time. Snake, for example, was made up of nearly 700 polygons. That's more than double the amount of polygons used by Core's Lara Croft in the first several Tomb Raider games. Then, add on top of that the phenomenal camera work, smart use of motion blur, and unprecedented cinematic presentation, and it's easy to see why Metal Gear Solid was primed to dominate the gaming space. But it wasn't without its technical hurdles. When deciding on how to properly realize this game's 3D atmosphere, the goal initially was to have the game be played from a first-person perspective, delivering the most realistic experience as possible. But Kojima shot down the idea, stating that the first-person games in the market weren't smooth enough and would make most gamers nauseous. He did still love the idea of being able to view the world from Snake's eyes though, and agreed to incorporate an optional first-person view button, usable only when standing still. The rest of the game would be rendered from a more traditional top-down perspective that would smoothly transition whenever the player wanted to peek around corners or crawl into a tight space. To help dial in these many camera angles, Kojima and assistant director Yoshikazu Matsuhana recreated the game's level environments using Lego bricks, and would pan a small camera across the build until they identified the proper camera distances for each corner. As these game environments started to come together, programmers and artists worked collaboratively to create the most realistic stealth action experience possible. Kojima was adamant that the game be true to life, and even had a research team flown out to meet with the Huntington Beach SWAT team in California for consultation on modern-day firearms and military vehicles. As development entered its second year, the game started to enter a playable state. Early builds of the game focused on an exterior helipad that was seamlessly connected to an interior tank hangar. A lot of work went into fine-tuning the core gameplay mechanics here, including what the player would be capable of and how the enemies would react. Once the game logic was locked down, steady progress was made in expanding the scope of the environment, allowing the nuclear warhead storage building and initial dock area to finally take shape. Finally, after 3 years of heightened anticipation, the project was complete, and Konami Computer Entertainment Japan released the third mainline entry to the series, Metal Gear Solid, exclusively for the Sony PlayStation. Metal Gear Solid kicks off 6 years after the events of Metal Gear 2, with Solid Snake being called out of retirement once again to help prevent a nuclear catastrophe. Foxhound, now controlled by series newcomer Liquid Snake and his army of genome soldiers, have rebelled against the United States government, and have taken control of a nuclear disposal facility in Alaska called Shadow Moses. Their demands: the remains of the legendary soldier Big Boss, the lead antagonist for the past 2 titles. Refusing to give in to these demands, the US pressures Roy Campbell to put together an infiltration team consisting of field operative Solid Snake, geneticist Naomi Hunter, data analyst Mei Ling, and returning survival consultant from Metal Gear 2, Master Miller. Their mission? To infiltrate Shadow Moses Island, rescue 2 high-profile hostages, and confirm whether or not the insurrectionists possess the capabilities to launch a nuclear strike. Right from the get-go, Metal Gear Solid demonstrates a massive shift towards a more properly realized cinematic presentation. Key parts in the narrative are now highlighted with high-quality cutscenes, with varying camera angles and cuts incorporated to mimic a major motion picture film. Characters are also fully voiced for the first time, with the most notable performance coming from a 28-year-old David Hayter.
There are no heroes in war. All the heroes I know are either dead or in prison, one or the other.
But Snake, you're a hero, aren't you?
I'm just a man who's good at what he does, killing.
Hayter initially auditioned for the role of Solid Snake using his own natural speaking voice, securing the part. But after reading over the script and learning of Snake's long and painful history, he decided to inject more bitterness and contempt into the performance, ultimately redefining the character and solidifying himself as one of the most beloved and iconic voices in video game history. Adding to this is Metal Gear Solid's unforgettable musical score that seamlessly blends calm, tension-building swells with suspenseful percussion-based action pieces that will trigger after alerting an enemy. And then, of course, there's the gameplay. Metal Gear Solid builds off of the previously established concepts and reworks them to function within the confines of a rendered 3D space. Sneaking past guards, searching for supplies, and hoofing it under a cardboard box all return more or less the same, though the increased range of movement and verticality literally adds a new dimension to it all, with players able to climb up ladders, navigate through air vents, and press their backs up against walls to peek down hallways. But this increased freedom is shared with the enemy as well, who are capable of spotting Snake even if they themselves aren't visible on screen. To help with this, players are now shown every enemy's cone of vision on the radar display. If a player is detected outside of this yellow cone, then the enemy may enter into an investigative state, where they'll check out the disturbance for a few seconds before returning to their patrol. It's very similar to the way enemies reacted to sound in Metal Gear 2, but it's now expanded to include visual disturbances you might not expect, like footprints left in the snow, or hiding in a cardboard box that belongs in a different building. Simply put, these soldiers aren't quite as easy to fool, and will require slightly more finesse to slip by unnoticed. Though of course, stealth isn't always an option. Sometimes Snake just has to get his hands dirty, and Metal Gear Solid features lots of new combat mechanics too. Hand-to-hand combat is now built around a 3-hit combo attack, with 2 punches and a kick capable of knocking an enemy onto their back. And if a player lands 2 of these combos, they may temporarily stun the enemy without permanently killing them. Alternatively, players can quickly flip an enemy over their back, or grab them and use them as a human shield, a helpful technique for players that want to drag a guard somewhere quiet and eliminate them without being noticed. The game's firearms are also handled a bit differently this time. Bullets aren't just small ping-pong balls anymore, and fire at a more realistic velocity, making the full-auto FAMAS a more practical weapon in combat encounters than the full-auto weapons offered in the past. Metal Gear Solid also introduces the semi-automatic PSG-1 sniper rifle that, like the Stinger missile launcher, is locked to a first-person viewpoint, where the movement keys are used to fine-tune the crosshair. Another weapon worth mentioning is the chaff grenade. The chaff grenade is a throwable explosive device that doesn't deal any direct damage to enemies, but it can be used to disable a number of electrical devices around Shadow Moses Island. Outside of that, Metal Gear Solid is remarkably very much the same as Metal Gear 2. In fact, some argue that it's practically a remake. There's the initial infiltration sequence where Snake needs to crawl into a vent to enter a large tank hangar, the battle with some sort of ninja, the cryptic helpful messages over the codec.
Just call me Deep Throat.
Boss battles with tanks and helicopters, blowing open walls with explosives, trapdoors, invisible enemies that appear alongside Snake in an elevator, pretty much everything. And this won't be the last instance of this happening either. The rehash of these aspects is very much something Kojima intended, hoping to translate this idea of the monotony and endlessness of war, though it also serves to reintroduce clever game concepts from before that many gamers, especially in the West, still hadn't had a chance to experience. And now that it was finally in their hands, they were blown away. Metal Gear Solid was an incredible achievement, far beyond what anyone could have hoped for in 1998. The music, the acting, the graphics, the stealth action, the deep lore, it was all overwhelming. And thanks to brilliant marketing campaigns like Pizza Hut's pizza-powered PlayStation giveaway, over 12 million gamers were able to try out Metal Gear Solid's opening hour, greatly contributing to the game's popularity.
A surveillance camera?
When the game finally hit store shelves, it managed to generate almost $52 million in revenue within the first 4 months, far exceeding the expectations of both Konami and its developers. Accompanying these incredible sales numbers were a sea of glowing reviews, with some like IGN claiming it to be as close to perfection as possible. The game was praised primarily for its gorgeous visual direction, along with its outstanding story and character design that transcended industry norms and delivered a narrative that sought to rival the movie industry. The only publication to really lay into Metal Gear Solid was GameSpot, that criticized the title for its unstable frame rate, its short length, and its simplicity. Regardless, Metal Gear Solid was considered by most to be a masterpiece. It has since won countless awards for its highly innovative design, and continues to influence the design of video games today, with developers decades later still trying to emulate the feel of its cinematic storytelling. What's more, Metal Gear Solid had finally popularized the stealth action genre, despite the concept having been introduced several decades prior. And before long, established franchises and newcomers alike using stealth action elements would begin to flood the scene, harrowing in a golden age for the genre. Soon after Metal Gear Solid's release, Konami Computer Entertainment Japan worked on creating an updated version of the game for Japanese audiences called Metal Gear Solid Integral. This version includes a number of tweaks to the Japanese PlayStation release of the game, including an option to toggle between the original Japanese voice actors and the English dubs, new gameplay modes and skins to add replay value, and a separate disc titled Metal Gear Solid VR Missions, expanding the previously included bonus content with up to 300 playable stages, with a special teaser for a planned mainline sequel. Integral was then ported over to the Windows PC by an American-based company called Digital Dialect a year later, that sported options for higher resolutions and keyboard control. However, because of the nature of the PC platform, this release of Metal Gear Solid cuts out a lot of the PlayStation-specific features fans have come to love from the game, most notably Psycho Mantis' fourth wall-breaking speech, where he reads the player's PlayStation memory card. But there's no denying that at the cusp of the new millennium, Metal Gear Solid shared a mutually beneficial relationship with the PlayStation platform, boosting its popularity while simultaneously skyrocketing console sales. And this partnership would continue with Kojima's vision of the series' future. About a month prior to Metal Gear Solid's first release, Kojima was preparing to retire from his tale of epic espionage, hoping to deliver his growing fanbase something different. But with the overwhelming success of his PlayStation debut, he found he couldn't escape his fate, and a sequel became the lead focus for him and his studio soon after. Then, as they were studying the newly acquired PlayStation 2 development kits, a request came in from Konami's Europe offices for a Game Boy Color entry to the series. Kojima, intrigued by the prospect of translating their 3D rendered gameplay back into sprite form, agreed to take on the challenge and tapped graphic designer Akuya Nakamura, programmer Fukushima, and lead director Shinta Nojiri to assist, along with a handful of other support staff at various stages of development. The goal for this project was to translate the newer Metal Gear Solid experience into something that kids could play portably in the schoolyard. The Game Boy Color was tailored more towards children after all, so a lot of thought went into making the game more kid-friendly, while still maintaining Metal Gear's signature themes and style. This resulted in some fairly bizarre story elements that Kojima later admitted may have been a bit too extreme, even for the Metal Gear universe. Though, thanks to the efforts of Nakamura, the graphical design still managed to portray the world of Metal Gear in a faithful, realistic way, with complex sprite animation work that far surpassed other Game Boy titles at the time. It took a relatively long time to complete, with development efforts for Metal Gear Solid's sequel often taking priority. But in the spring of 2000, Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel was made available to Japanese gamers, with European and American releases following only a week later. Ghost Babel is another entry to the series that is not considered to be canon to the main Metal Gear storyline. The story kicks off 7 years after the original Metal Gear game, with the theft of a US-funded Metal Gear project by a militant rebel group in Africa called the Gindra Liberation Front. Once more, Snake is called upon by his CEO Roy Campbell to help. Only this time, Snake is returning to the place where it all started, Outer Heaven, where this new militant group has mysteriously set up shop again. The narrative as a whole is mostly on brand for the Metal Gear series. Snake begrudgingly comes out of retirement, infiltrates a heavily guarded facility, fights some wacky bosses, and takes down a new type of Metal Gear mech. Though the inclusion of a number of brand new support characters, and its attempted explanation for Big Boss's rebellion in the original game, does part with the series' eventual canonical events, and today it feels more like a fan fiction within the collection. From a gameplay perspective, Ghost Babel makes the most of the Game Boy Color's technical capabilities, and feels like a hybrid of the original top-down titles and the newer, far more successful Metal Gear Solid. Because the visuals rely on pixel art once more, the camera is limited to only a top-down perspective. Though Snake's abilities have been refined, allowing him to travel diagonally and hug walls just like on the PlayStation. Another big change is how the game is split up into separate stages, with the player being given a score based on the completion time and number of alerts raised. To enhance the length of the title, Ghost Babel also includes a number of shorter VR missions, and extra replayable scenarios that change up the patrol patterns of enemies and the location of key items. It's a competent entry to the series through and through, especially in how it tackles the Game Boy's obvious technical limitations, and the result was a solid critical reception. Many reviewers awarded the game perfect scores across the board, commenting on the game's ambitious narrative and smart incorporation of Metal Gear's signature mechanics. Others noted Ghost Babel's clever system-link multiplayer mode that pinned two players against each other in an arena-style deathmatch, one of the earliest examples of stealth action multiplayer gameplay. Though, while Ghost Babel was a remarkably successful game in its own right, it would understandably be the next mainline entry that the core fanbase was most excited for.
E já é top 4 do mundo de novo!
Back in the fall of 1998, Konami Computer Entertainment in Japan saw a rapid growth to both its staff size and its available funding. Metal Gear Solid was primed to be a hit, and Konami knew that fans would expect a more ambitious sequel from the studio responsible. So in preparation, they began to reorganize their many subsidiaries, merging the Aoyama studio with KCE Japan to form Konami Computer Entertainment Japan West, while a separate manga-focused studio, Shinjuku, was renamed into KCE Japan East. During this growth phase, the Metal Gear team grew from 15 people to roughly 70, requiring additional management on Kojima's part. All the while, Kojima had already established a rough outline for where he wanted to take Solid Snake next, with an ambitious new adventure set in the tumultuous Middle East. According to Kojima, the sequel to Metal Gear Solid was initially set around a nuclear inspection near Iraq, where a line of new nuclear-equipped Metal Gear mechs was rumored to be in development. Then, as a prototype Metal Gear is being transported by an aircraft carrier, returning antagonist Liquid attempts to steal the weapon for himself, to which Solid Snake responds. Many of these elements would inevitably make their way into the final game, though because of the escalated tension in real-world Iraq during these early phases, the action was ultimately relocated to New York City's harbor, and the aircraft carrier concept gradually transitioned into a smaller tanker ship instead. With the location now locked down, Kojima sent a field research team out to New York to capture photographs of the harbor and various landmarks that they had intended to feature throughout the course of the game. Meanwhile, Kojima and the core sound designers decided that they would take advantage of the increased budget further, and wrote to professional music composer Harry Gregson Williams after hearing his accompanying score for the film The Replacement Killers. Williams, intrigued by the opportunity to create a score for a video game, agreed to participate, and reimagine some of the tracks from the original game with a much fuller orchestral sound. During this time, the programming team was hard at work constructing a new engine tailor-made for the PlayStation 2's 128-bit CPU, along with the higher data capacity of its DVD-ROMs. The character models, for example, could now be rendered with exponentially more detail, with Snake alone sporting more than 3,000 more polygons than his appearance on the PlayStation. But it wasn't just an increase to geometry and texture quality that led to the sequel's incredible visual presentation. The major focus of development for the next generation of Metal Gear Solid involved capturing atmospheric elements that couldn't be properly shown before. Aspects like wind, heat, dampness, and the cold were all things that the team spent a lot of their time highlighting using clever visual tricks and techniques, like having rain splashes be tied to the character models as opposed to being rendered independently, or generating mirrored geometry underneath an alpha texture to simulate the reflections along the rain-soaked decks. The physical manipulation of the game world was another area that the programmers wanted to perfect, and they ensured hundreds of props would react dynamically to gunfire and explosions, ensuring players would feel as immersed as possible. But pretty level environments and slick effects can only immerse the player so far. To really build upon what they had already established with Metal Gear Solid, the team also wanted to greatly overhaul the game's artificial intelligence, and have players face off against soldiers that could think and work together as a team. To accomplish this, military and firearms expert Motosada Mori returned to provide consultation, and had the programming team act out tactical SWAT maneuvers throughout their own studio, teaching them how to hold firearms, breach rooms, and communicate under pressure. These lessons paid off tremendously, and with the help of new motion capture equipment, the programmers were able to incorporate hundreds of unique and realistic animations for the various enemy soldiers, greatly racking up the tension of each encounter with them. As the months rolled on, Kojima opted to broaden his approach to the game's design, and along with his co-writer Fukushima, distributed what they called idea notebooks to each member of the team. They were then told to think of one good idea each day and write it down in their notebooks, which were then looked over that evening by Kojima and Fukushima personally. By doing this, they were able to generate a ton of clever new gameplay mechanics to help set the sequel apart, like hiding in lockers, peeking around corners, and vaulting over ledges, all features that would soon be put on full display for the fans to judge themselves. At the dawn of the new millennium, Hideo Kojima and the rest of the developers at KCEJ West were ready to show off what they had been working on for the past 2 years. Production was incredibly tight-lipped up until this point, with only subtle hints and teases like the concept art of Metal Gear Ray and the VR mission disc. But at E3 2000, audiences everywhere were finally given their first glimpse of the groundbreaking Metal Gear Solid 2. The trailer featured 10 minutes of in-engine gameplay footage, showing off the game's tanker location, the new gameplay mechanics, and all the beautiful visual effects that I mentioned before. What's even more remarkable though is that these incredible graphics that were well beyond anything advertised for the PS2 thus far were also being rendered at a buttery smooth 60 frames per second, an industry first for a major AAA action title. As expected, the hype mounted considerably following this reveal. Gamers everywhere now had a legitimate reason to purchase Sony's next-gen PlayStation 2 console, and it quickly became the most highly anticipated game of 2001. To deliver on its lofty promises though, the development staff had to dial up their efforts significantly, with long work hours often pouring over into the weekends. To make matters worse, it soon became apparent that the main tanker mission area would be too short to support the entire game. So Kojima decided to incorporate a previously shelved concept into the mix. A second scenario that would see the player navigating a massive oil rig. But that of course wouldn't be the only surprise Kojima had in store for the series' fans. Back when Metal Gear Solid had first released, a demographic study was conducted within a nearby school system to determine the type of gamers interested in the series. What they found was that the female demographic had little to no interest in games starring older men like Snake. Taking this to heart, Kojima came up with the idea to introduce an entirely new character to the series, one that players would control exclusively throughout the course of the oil rig sequence of events. This would serve two critical purposes. One, it would allow